3 statistical secrets that you need to know heading into the Imola Grand Prix. Welcome to the Pitwall, your stop for fantasy Formula 1 content. You can like and subscribe to keep up to date with more content like this. I'm J Jack, and let's go. Price versus value. The total cost of all the drivers combined is $279.8 million. It's almost down an entire million from last race. That's not a big deal, but here is what we want to keep in mind. You want to make sure your driver or your constructor is having the bang for their buck. For example, Hamilton, he costs $33.5 million, which is 33% of your cap because you have 6 slots on your team, but he only takes 12% of the entire driver cost. Now, in 2020, Hamilton averaged 27.7 points per race. Last race, the first race of the 2021 season, he scored 45 points. That's a cost value of 4.1%, second highest of all drivers. And spoiler alert, number 1 is Norris. We'll get back to him later. Now remember, Hamilton gets lots of bonuses. He has a high ceiling. He doesn't DNF. Overall, teams that had Hamilton scored big last week. Secret number 2 pertains to the drivers. Hamilton and Verstappen are the 2 biggest names on the grid right now, and they have the highest scores. In 2020, Hamilton, who would cost 12% of the drivers, was returning on average 10%. Verstappen, he cost 8.9%, but was returning 7.4%. Last race, Hamilton, still at 12% compared to last season. He gave 16.1% on his return. Verstappen, costing 9% of the drivers, gave a return of 12.5%. That gives Hamilton the 4.1% value, which is second best, and Verstappen with third best at 3.5%. Now, between Hamilton and Verstappen, there is still an $8.3 million difference, even though that closed the gap over last race. Is that enough, though, to buy a better driver to pair up with Verstappen compared to keeping Hamilton? That's a choice you've got to make. But this now brings us to our value pick. Last race, the value pick was Norris. He averaged a 1.6% value in the 2020 season. Last race, he, taking 4.8% of the driver cost, returned 10.4%. That is the highest of a 5.6%. That is the value pick from last race, and he continues to be the value pick for this race. To put this in perspective, his value doubles that of Tsunoda. Why do I bring up Tsunoda? Because we are introducing our money picks. We are introducing our money picks. Our top 2 drivers that had the biggest upswing in value were Tsunoda and Leclerc. Tsunoda having a 2.4% value, Leclerc though having a 0.9% value, very marginal. But both of these drivers raised their value by 0.6 million. So it's only one race, keep that in mind. If you're having to make a decision between these 2 drivers, Tsunoda and Leclerc, what are you going to do with them? I recommend you hold on to Tsunoda and you use Leclerc to trade up to substitute him to get higher value. To put this in perspective, Tsunoda has a higher ceiling in which he can increase in value. He has a $2.3 million difference to Gasly. He is cheaper than Gasly. Leclerc, on the other hand, is $3 million higher than Sainz. And the question is, as we go forward, how big is that disparity going to be allowed to happen between drivers? So trading up Leclerc will allow you to get another driver who's potentially more valuable, so you can lock your team value over 100 million. That is the biggest advantage. If you can get your team locked in at over $100 million value, your cap for the next race is going to remain above 100. This now brings us to secret number 3 concerning the constructors. Surprise, surprise, the top 2 picks by the player base was Red Bull at 31% of all teams had Red Bull as their constructor, and McLaren, which 29% of all teams had them as theirs. Where's Mercedes? They come in at 11%, with Ferrari close behind at 10%. Let's compare the numbers to see what the community's choosing, because they're trying to balance out drivers and the analytical data. Mercedes last season averaged 18 points more than Red Bull. Comparing to last race, Mercedes had a 3.8% value and scored 67 points. Red Bull had a value of 5.4% and scored 53 points. McLaren had a value of 4.1% and scored 39 points. And Ferrari had a dismal negative 0.9% value and scored 26 points. That means that Mercedes scored 14 more points than Red Bull, who scored 14 more points than McLaren, who scored 13 more points than Ferrari. Mercedes scored 28 points more than McLaren. Yes, it cost 19.8 million more, and you would have to make that decision. Can you get enough drivers to overcome that deficit if you had 19.8 million more to spend? But that means that Mercedes is 11.8 million more than Red Bull, who's at 8 million more than McLaren, and McLaren is only 0.2 million more than Ferrari, which means McLaren is infinitely better than Ferrari. Do not pick Ferrari. They're only 0.2 million more, McLaren is, than Ferrari, and they gained 13 points last race. If you hold out that percentage, that is going to be huge over the course of a season. Now, here's the tough part. McLaren is potentially weaker than Red Bull because there's $8 million difference. And yes, Red Bull did score 14 points more, but you have to decide, can you get a better driver with 8 million more to spend? Perhaps a driver you can turbo, which would give you double the points per race. And now we have to go to the two biggies from last season, Red Bull versus Mercedes. Red Bull is edging it out over Mercedes because it is $11.8 million cheaper, but you're sacrificing 14 points. Yes, that's less than last season's average of 18 points, which is good. And you also have to realize that Perez didn't qualify very high. Both Hamilton and Bottas qualified normal, which means that the potential for Red Bull to overcome their deficit is much better. Moreover, you could potentially pick up a better driver, a driver you could even turbo with 11.8 million more dollars. However, Mercedes does not DNF very often. You got to be aware of that because Red Bull has been having some technical issues over the last couple of practices. You got to decide, do you want security in the money you're spending on Mercedes, or do you want to go cheaper with Red Bull and hope that they are upswinging in their value and you could capitalize on that? Now time for my picks. I've got two teams that I'm running this season with two different philosophies. One that's got Red Bull as its constructor, one that's got Mercedes as constructor. Team number one, I'm going to keep as is. Red Bull has a huge upswing, 0.3 million, 0.1 million, and Perez, if he improves this race weekend, will probably increase as well. In the bottom left-hand corner of your team, you click the informational button and you can see your team value. I'm at 99.8 million. My remaining budget is 1.2 million. Due to the increase of value, I am now sitting at 1.1 million. That is $1 million over the budget cap, and I want to capitalize on that. So we're going to manage my team. As you can see here, Giovinazzi is at an 89% chance. He's been about 10% shift every single day. So I want to trade him out before he drops. We're going to drop Giovinazzi. With 9.1 million, you can't afford anybody more. So I have to use a second substitution. Therefore, I'm going to get rid of George Russell. Now I have 15.3 million in which to work with. First, we're going to pick up the cheaper driver than Russell, Schumacher, 5.8. Yes, his sentiment is at negative 81%, but if I sub in for him, yes, he might go down by 1 million if he goes down by 1 million, but I will have secured at least a 0.9 million budget cap increase. This now leaves me 9.5. Now I can afford Raikkonen. Raikkonen's sentiment is at 62% negative. It's probably not going to change. He scored 12 points, whereas Giovinazzi scored 5. You can see our race reaction podcast for the Bahrain Grand Prix to understand why he got so many points compared to Giovinazzi. But I'm going to pick up Raikkonen. And with 2 subs, I'm going to hit save. As we can see here, now my value is at 100.1 million and my total value is 100.1 million compared to team 1, where the team value is at 100.4 million, remaining budget 0.3. There's not much room to grow, but I've been able to increase my team's value above team 1. So hopefully this combination will continue to grow and be a very powerful team. So remember, you want to make sure you're picking drivers who you think are going to be beating their teammates. That's how they're going to get their extra bonus points. And you also want to make sure you've got a team that's going to increase with value, not just because everybody's wanting that driver, but because that driver is going to score you points. A driver who scores you good points is going to also get good value. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time on the Pitwall.